My wife kissed another man on a night out. She's upset it didn't bother me. Now I'm divorcing her. It was just another Saturday night when everything changed. My wife had gone out with friends, and I had no reason to be suspicious. She assured me she was just having a fun time. But when she returned, something was off. There was a look in her eyes that I could not place. She had kissed another man while out, and it was not just a harmless peck. It was a kiss that meant something. It was clear she had crossed a line, but it wasn't the kiss itself that caught me off guard. It was her reaction. She expected me to be angry, to demand answers, or to throw a fit. But instead, I was calm, composed, and almost detached. Her shock was evident. The fact that I was not upset by her actions bothered her more than the betrayal itself. She had hoped for a reaction from me, but I had none to offer. And now, after everything, I had made a decision that would change our lives forever. This was the breaking point, and I knew what I had to do. From the very beginning, I thought we were the perfect couple. My wife and I met during college, and our connection was undeniable. We clicked on so many levels, it felt like fate had brought us together. We had shared interests, mutual respect, and a sense of understanding that many people long for. The years went by, and our relationship only deepened. We got married a few years after graduating, and despite the usual ups and downs that come with adjusting to married life, we built a solid foundation. For a long time, we were in sync. We shared the same goals, laughed at the same jokes, and enjoyed the quiet comfort of just being with each other. The world outside seemed like a blur when we were together. Our friends and family admired us as a couple. I had always thought that what we had was unbreakable. We were partners in every sense of the word, and nothing seemed capable of shaking that belief. But slowly, over time, I noticed some changes. It wasn't anything huge, but there were little things that caught my attention. She started going out more often with her friends, returning home later than usual. She claimed it was nothing more than a girl's night out or a happy hour at the bar. I didn't mind. After all, we were both adults, and I knew she needed her time with her friends just as much as I needed my own space. Yet, something was off. Her phone would buzz with messages when we were together, and she would quickly glance at it before putting it away. The look in her eyes when she mentioned her friends' outings started to feel rehearsed. It was almost as if she was trying to convince herself, or maybe even me, that everything was still the same. But nothing prepared me for the night she came home late from a night out. She smelled of cologne I didn't recognize, strong and foreign. She brushed it off, claiming she had hugged someone at the bar. But deep inside, I knew. The nagging feeling wouldn't leave, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had always trusted her completely, maybe too much. She had built a reputation as a responsible, loyal person, and I had no reason to doubt that. We never argued about our relationship, and even when we did have minor disagreements, they were easily resolved. She was my rock, my confidant, and the person I imagined growing old with. It's hard to shake that sense of security when you've built a life with someone. However, as time passed, the dynamic between us shifted. We didn't argue, but we also didn't have the same kind of connection we once did. I could tell that something was brewing beneath the surface. It wasn't just her late nights or the change in her routine, but her behavior also became more distant. We stopped having the same deep conversations, and she would often retreat into her phone or watch TV in silence. We lived in the same house, but sometimes it felt like we were strangers sharing space. I tried to push these thoughts aside, convincing myself that it was just a phase. People get busy. Relationships have their ebbs and flows. I kept telling myself that there was no need to overthink things, but every time I saw her acting a bit too carefree or heard her talk about her nights out, the unease grew. Deep down, I had started to feel that she was losing interest, and I couldn't figure out why. Had I changed? Had she changed? Did we simply grow apart without realizing it? Then came the night when everything came crashing down. She came home late, with that unfamiliar cologne scent clinging to her. She was acting different, almost as if she was trying to hide something. I didn't say anything immediately. I waited, watched, and gave her the benefit of the doubt. But the doubt within me grew larger by the minute, and when I found out what had really happened, the entire foundation of our marriage began to crumble. The first sign that something was off came a few days before the night out. My wife had been acting strangely distant, more so than usual. She was spending extra time at work, answering phone calls with a tone that sounded too light, too casual. The little things that usually didn't catch my attention began to stand out. She'd leave the room if I entered while she was texting, or she would quickly close her phone when I walked by. It wasn't overtly suspicious, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt in my mind. I knew she had a group of friends she often went out with. I'd heard about their plans for a girls' night out weeks before, but this time it felt different. There was something in the way she talked about it, something in the way she mentioned who would be there. She didn't usually go into detail, but this time she made it a point to mention a name I wasn't familiar with, Ryan. She said he was a friend from her office, a guy she had met through mutual colleagues. He was apparently funny and easygoing, someone who added to the dynamic of the group. When she came home that night, she seemed fine, but there was something about her behavior that made me uneasy. She didn't come straight to me like she usually did after a night out. Instead, she went straight to the bathroom and took longer than usual getting ready for bed. I didn't press her for details because I thought it wasn't a big deal. Maybe I was just overthinking things, but my instincts told me something was wrong. The real confirmation of my suspicions came when I accidentally glanced at her phone the next morning. It was completely unintentional. I had just grabbed it to check the time, and her notifications popped up. At first, I didn't think much of it, but as I scrolled through the messages, I saw a string of texts between her and Ryan that immediately stopped me in my tracks. The messages were playful, flirtatious, and filled with inside jokes. As I read through them, I couldn't ignore how personal they seemed. It wasn't just small talk or casual exchanges. It was a conversation full of things that shouldn't have been shared. The more I read, the more I realized that these weren't just innocent texts. It was clear that they were bonding over private moments, and the tone felt too intimate to be labeled as just friends. But it didn't end there. As I continued to read, the messages grew even more suggestive. They were talking about the night they shared, how they had enjoyed themselves so much that they couldn't wait to do it again. The text that hit me the hardest was the one where she casually mentioned that they had shared a kiss. A kiss. My heart sank in that moment, as all the pieces clicked into place. My wife, the woman I had trusted with my life, had kissed another man, and she was laughing it off as if it meant nothing. It was such a sharp contrast to the guilt that I would have expected in her texts if she were truly remorseful. But no, there was no remorse. No apologies. Just more jokes. As if this was all just some harmless fun. I was frozen, holding her phone in my hand. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly helpless. How long had this been going on? How many other texts or conversations like this had I missed? Was this the first time something like this had happened? Or was this a part of a much bigger betrayal? I put the phone down, pacing the room. My mind was racing, but my thoughts were clouded. I tried to put myself in her shoes. Why would she do this? Why would she throw away everything we had for a meaningless fling? Was it something I had done? Had I not been enough for her? Questions swirled around me, but there were no clear answers. It wasn't just the kiss that shocked me. It was the realization that my wife had been deceiving me all along. I couldn't help but wonder what else she had been hiding. The lies felt like a weight pressing down on me, suffocating me. The woman I had married, the woman I had believed in, was someone completely different from the person who had been texting Ryan late into the night. But as much as I wanted to confront her immediately, I held back. I wasn't ready. I needed more time to process this. I couldn't just let my emotions take over, not when I wasn't fully certain of everything yet. There was one thing I knew for sure, though things would never be the same again. The trust that had taken years to build had been shattered in an instant. I decided to take a step back. I needed to confront her with the truth, but I also needed to be calm. I spent the next few hours in a daze trying to figure out the best course of action. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine, but I also didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing how much this hurt me. What was I supposed to do now? How could I move forward with someone who had so easily betrayed me? The situation was a mess, and I knew I had to find the strength to face her. It wasn't just about the kiss anymore. It was about the lies, the secrecy, and the complete disregard for the trust that had been the foundation of our marriage. I had no idea how this was going to end, but one thing was certain. I would no longer let her dictate the narrative of my life. I spent the next few days in a state of confusion and disbelief, grappling with the reality of what I had uncovered. I could not ignore the gnawing feeling in my stomach every time I looked at her, and I could no longer pretend everything was normal. The weight of the situation hung over me like a dark cloud, casting a shadow on every moment we spent together. It felt like I was suffocating, trapped in a lie that was too painful to confront. Finally, I decided I could not wait any longer. I had to face her and get the truth. I needed answers. She had no idea that I knew about the kiss, or the messages, or the extent of her betrayal. The thought of confronting her made my blood run cold, but I knew I had to do it. It was a Friday evening when I made the decision to sit her down. She had just returned home from work, and I could sense her usual excitement and energy as she walked in the door. But for me, everything had changed. I could barely look at her without feeling a wave of anger and disappointment. I had spent the last few days pretending, but now the mask was about to come off. I waited until we were sitting in the living room, the silence between us so thick you could almost cut it with a knife. Her eyes flickered with a sense of unease, but she had no idea what was coming. "How was your day?" she asked, trying to make small talk, but I could hear the nervousness in her voice. I did not answer right away. Instead, I looked at her carefully, weighing my words, trying to figure out how to approach the conversation. "I know about the kiss," I said quietly, my voice steady but filled with the anger I had been holding back for days. "I know everything." Her face went pale, and for the first time in days, I saw genuine panic in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. The tension in the room was unbearable. I watched as she tried to collect herself, but it was clear she was caught off guard. "How long?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from creeping into my tone. "How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me?" Her hands trembled slightly as she shifted in her seat, clearly struggling to come up with an explanation. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but there was also a sense of defensiveness, like she was trying to justify her actions in some way. "It was just one kiss," she began, her voice shaky. "It didn't mean anything, I swear. I was drunk and it was a mistake. I never meant to hurt you." The words felt like daggers, each one more painful than the last. She was trying to downplay what had happened, as if it were something insignificant, as if kissing another man was just a fleeting moment of weakness. But I knew better. I knew this wasn't just about a kiss. It was about the lies, the secrecy, and the complete disregard for everything we had built together. "One kiss?" I repeated, my voice growing colder. "Is that what you think this is? A mistake? You think a kiss like that is something that can just be brushed off?" She opened her mouth again, but this time, I didn't let her speak. "You've been hiding this from me for weeks," I continued, feeling my emotions rise to the surface. "And not just this. I've been suspicious for a while, but I trusted you. I trusted you with everything I had. And now I find out you've been texting him, making plans with him, and all while I'm here thinking everything is fine." She tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand, silencing her. "No, you don't get to speak yet. I need you to understand how this feels. I've spent years building a life with you, and you've thrown it all away for someone who doesn't matter. For someone who will never mean anything to you in the way I do. You've disrespected me, and you've disrespected everything we've ever had." Tears welled up in her eyes, but they did nothing to change the coldness that had settled in my chest. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel the need to comfort her. If anything, seeing her cry made the situation even more bitter. She had put herself in this position, and now she had to face the consequences. "You can't fix this," I said, my voice finally breaking through the anger that had consumed me. "I've been patient. I've been understanding. But this is too much. You've betrayed me in a way that I can't even process. And I don't think I want to. I'm done." She started to reach for my hand, her voice pleading. "Please don't say that. We can work through this. We can fix this, I swear." But I couldn't listen to her anymore. The damage was done, and I couldn't ignore it. "No, you've made your choices and I've made mine. I'm done. I want a divorce." The room seemed to go still, her words lost in the silence that followed. Her face fell, and I could see the realization sink in. She had pushed me too far, and now there was no going back. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. After I told her I wanted a divorce, everything changed. There was no more pretending, no more quiet nights spent together, no more of the routine that had once made our life feel secure. Instead, there was only the cold reality of what had happened, and the painful truth that things would never go back to the way they were. She begged me for forgiveness, but I could see in her eyes that it wasn't just the affair that had broken us. It was the betrayal, the lies, and the lack of respect. She had taken something precious and thrown it away, and now no amount of pleading could fix what had been shattered. I moved out within a week, finding a small apartment that felt like a fresh start, a clean slate. It was hard at first, being away from the home I had shared with her, the life we had built. But even as I unpacked my things and started to adjust to my new reality, a sense of relief began to settle over me. I was no longer living in the shadow of her lies. I no longer had to question her loyalty or wonder if she was being honest with me. It was over. She tried to contact me multiple times in the first few weeks, sending texts and emails, calling and leaving voicemails. She was desperate to reconcile, to make things right, to pretend that we could somehow go back to the way things were before. But I remained firm. The damage was too deep, and the trust that had been broken could never be repaired. I went through the motions of finalizing the divorce. The process was painful, but I knew it was the right decision. Every step I took away from her was a step toward regaining control of my life, a life that had been so out of my hands for far too long. The legal proceedings felt like a distant echo compared to the emotional journey I had already been through. I was no longer filled with anger or sadness, just a quiet determination to move forward. As I navigated the divorce, I began to realize something important. I had been stuck in a toxic relationship for too long. I had allowed myself to be manipulated and betrayed because I was too afraid of letting go. I had been so consumed by the idea of saving the marriage that I ignored the fact that it was already beyond saving. Now I was free. I was free to make choices for myself, free to focus on my own happiness, free to rebuild a life that didn't have to be defined by betrayal. There was a certain power in walking away. It wasn't about seeking revenge or hurting her the way she had hurt me. It was about reclaiming my own dignity. I wasn't going to let her actions define me. I wasn't going to let the hurt she caused dictate my future. I was in control again. In the weeks that followed, I found myself growing stronger. I focused on myself in a way I had never done before. I started going to the gym, taking long walks, and spending more time with friends and family who supported me through the difficult days. I began to rediscover the parts of myself that had been lost in the chaos of my marriage. Then, one day, I met someone new. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something I was looking for. But as I spent time with this person, I realized that I had the capacity for love and trust again. It wasn't a rebound or an escape. It was a genuine connection, something I hadn't felt in years. It felt different, healthy, and exciting in a way that my marriage had never been. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel hopeful again. Meanwhile, my ex-wife's life seemed to spiral. She tried to move on, but the guilt and shame weighed heavily on her. I could see that she regretted what she had done, but the damage had been done, and there was no way to erase it. She had lost me, and nothing she did could change that. As much as she wanted me to come back, I knew I could never return to a life where trust was so easily shattered. As I reflected on everything that had happened, I came to realize something that helped me find peace. My ex-wife's affair wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. I had spent years in a marriage that didn't bring me the happiness I deserved. It had taken something as painful as betrayal to finally open my eyes to what I truly needed in life. I had to lose her in order to find myself. The divorce was finalized, and I walked away with a sense of freedom and renewal that I never thought was possible. I had learned the hard way that love is not enough to hold a relationship together. Trust, respect, and communication are the true foundations of any partnership. Without those, a relationship is nothing more than a house built on sand. As time passed, I continued to focus on my personal growth. I surrounded myself with positive influences and learned to prioritize my own well-being. I was no longer defined by my past mistakes or the betrayal I had suffered. I was moving forward, building a future that was mine to shape. And then, as if by fate, my new relationship flourished. It wasn't rushed or forced. It simply felt right. With every passing day, I grew more confident in my ability to trust again, to love again, and to believe in the possibility of something real. Thank you for watching and listening to my story. If you found it relatable or eye-opening, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new video.